My name is Elizabeth, and my name is Dalal Shahid, and this is our story today on Discovering Palestinian Intellect, the special edition of Chatting with Slava the Jordanian on the Mindset Mastery Moments. Welcome back. I am your host, STJ, and today we have a very special treat for you guys. It's the double pleasure. We have two sisters, Elizabeth and Dalal Shahid, and I would like to introduce them to you by reading their biography. Elizabeth Shahid is a licensed marriage and family therapist based in Alabama with 12 years of experience in the mental health field. Throughout her career, she has worked across diverse settings, including clinics, hospitals, university counseling centers, inpatient and outpatient programs, and private practice, bringing a depth of perspective to her therapeutic work. Elizabeth earned a bachelor's degree in human development and family studies from the University of Alabama and her master's degree in marriage and family therapy from Valdosta State University in Georgia. She is the founder of Your Story Therapy, a teletherapy practice serving clients across Alabama. Much of her work centers on supporting individuals, navigating life between cultures, exploring identity, belonging, and complexity of living in more than one world. Wow. All right. Dalal, her sister, Dalal Shahid, is a licensed marriage and family therapist based in Birmingham, Alabama, also serving clients in the Huntsville area. Dalal works with individuals, couples, and families to navigate some of the life's most complex moments, from anxiety and depression to relationship conflict, parenting challenges, and identity or cultural issues. One of her specialty areas is supporting individuals struggling with eating disorder and body image concerns. She provides an affirming, evidence-based care that's rooted in compassion, curiosity for each person's unique story. Whether you're looking to improve communication, manage stress, or reconnect with yourself or others, she is there to help you move towards a more fulfilling life that you want to live. When she is not in session, she is usually chasing after her twin boys, exploring walking trails, cooking something passed down from her grandmother, or hanging out in a cozy coffee shops. Welcome, Elizabeth, and welcome, Dalal, and thank you so much for coming on this very special episode, knowing that, of course, you guys are busy, especially Dalal with the twin boys. So let's start by sharing with our audience and our listeners and take us down the memory lane of how did your grandparents end up here in the United States from Palestine. And obviously, since they are Palestinian refugees, they are the children of diaspora, I'm assuming. And let's start with Elizabeth.
Sure. Okay. Hi, everybody. So actually we're half Palestinian. So my mom is Palestinian and my dad is Lebanese. So I have two immigration stories. I do know about my grandmother coming to the States from Palestine. And she came over after she got married. Pretty much very soon after she got married in Palestine, her husband and her decided to come to America, where a lot of family members were already here in Alabama. There were actually many people who came over into many different cities throughout the United States from their town. So there are people from their town in California and Texas, New York, Florida, all over, and our family landed in Alabama. And so they came over with the idea that I think due to the Nakba and refugees and coming into their town and just struggles with the army that were coming in and just making life uncomfortable and difficult, our family had decided to start immigrating over to America. And so they came over, if I'm correct, I think it's in the 60s. And she came over, if actually I could do the math, let me think. If she was She was definitely born in 1943. Yeah, actually, it was in the 60s, and like the early 60s. They immigrated over here. And my grandfather and all his siblings and probably cousins and everybody who was here were peddlers. So they would get items from, I think, New York, and they would trade, like a trading company, I believe, and they had their vans full of items. And I imagine like they had like a jacket, but probably not. And they would like sell rugs and coats and watches and all kinds of things. And that's how he made a life here, is by selling items door to door throughout rural areas in Alabama.
So did they come to Alabama because they had extended family, or or somebody here, like a friend or a connection, said, "Hey, if you're thinking about getting, displacing yourself, unfortunately by default, come to Alabama. You're going to have the tribal support. You're going to have the help. We have room for you."
Yes, I think because a family was already here who had created a living situation. I think when he first came, he was living with just like the men came over first. So he came, but he came with his. Actually, he did come over here first with his brothers and his family. He actually started high school. Now that I'm thinking about it, he started high school here, and I think they live very, um, very simply. They probably all lived in an apartment together. And then when they got married, I think it was a similar arrangement. He went home to get married, or went to Palestine to get married, came back, and they all shared a space together until they were able to get a home. And even in the home, they shared with like 11 people in a 3-bedroom home. So it was very, very communal.
Yeah. So that's your paternal side or maternal side grandparents, they are both from Palestine. So now your mom is from Palestine and your dad is from Lebanon. Okay. Okay. So I'm assuming it's your maternal grandparents. Yes. Okay. How about the other side, the Lebanese side?
I personally don't know too much about it. So Elizabeth, you can correct me. But what I do know is that my father's father, so my grandfather, is actually from Zahli, and my grandmother is from Beirut, and then they ended up moving to Juni because of the war. Now, I'm not sure which war, and I should know that. But Elizabeth, do you know?
I wish I did.
Okay, me too. Me too. But that's all I know. And then they ended up moving to South Carolina because once again, there was family there. I'm not sure why the southern states. I still have not. And actually, do you know that? Because I've asked that.
I don't know why. The only connection that I could make is that because, and this is what I'm thinking about my mother, because we know more about our mother's side of the family because my father's parents passed away when he was younger. And so a lot of his questions that he wished he asked, he didn't get to ask. And so, it's us kind of guessing, and this is part of diaspora because we do have family members in Lebanon, and it's so difficult to know them or stay in touch when we're so separated. But my grandmother has told us many stories about her experience on my mother's side from Palestine. And I know for them, they were farmers. So they grew up on land and raising, not animal. They had some animals, yes, but it was mostly raising plants and olives and all kinds of things that they would sell. They would make olive oil, actually. And so I think this is my assumption, is that they probably came over because of the weather and because this was a farming area and they were familiar with that. But it's also because like their parent came here for I don't know what reason.
Well, when we displace ourselves by design or by default, after the dust settles from the whole immigration process and traveling, then you start looking for that tribal connection, right? The support from the tribe. I've been here since 1988, about 37 years, give or take. And And it's funny how when I turned 40, it didn't really bother me, the fact that, there's really no family except my siblings. Not until I hit menopause. And I was like, okay, where's my connection? I want to talk to my mom. I want to talk to the matriarchs in my family to share my struggle. And that's when I realized there's nobody around, and I am aging and, living through the advanced years by myself. So that's when you start rekindling some of the relationship. I start calling Jordan and reach out to my aunt in Saudi. And because the previous years, you just very, very busy trying to accomplish what you sacrificed everything for to accomplish coming to this country. So I agree with you. I think the weather has a lot to do with it. And as farmers, my mom comes from a farming community in Salt in Jordan, and my dad comes from landowners in Nablus, and in Jordan too, but it's all about the weather. I mean, if you grown up in a very dry or just warm weather, you're looking for that warmth again. It's almost nostalgic. It's another connection to our home world when we come into the new world. So it always fascinates me, the adjustments that those immigrants had to go through without any of the technology or the support that we have right now. Migrating and immigrating these days is so easy because the whole world is connected now. The whole world is such a small world because of the social media and the technological advancement that you can reach out to, with the WhatsApp, the chat. I'm constantly talking to Ihab's family in Egypt because they're on the phone all the time. So as if I'm there, they're videotaping all their birthday, the parties, the cookouts and stuff. I feel like I'm there, but that helps not to be disconnected from your heritage. So I guess my question to Dalal is, how did that affect you guys, being from these two beautiful worlds, which is Palestine and Lebanon? My mom went to AUB, American University in Beirut, and we used to own a condo in Beirut, Bilhamra, and unfortunately that's one of the first things that actually got bombed when the Civil War started in the 70s. But how do you feel that coming from two different heritages, growing up, do you feel like you had to constantly be playing upon, Lebanese culture and Palestinian culture? They're different. I mean, we're all Arabs, but it is different. The food is a little bit different. The accent's a little bit different. And what would you say was challenging about having multi-identity, growing up?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think the hardest part in my experience was not the difference between Palestinian and Lebanese. The difference was being both Arab and being both American. And, at the time growing up, I didn't realize it because I was a kid, and, but I remember having small instances where it would kind of bring me back to my identity and my culture and what I looked like. And I remember, vividly being in kindergarten, and we used to have these partnerships where the older children would walk us to church. And I would always think to myself, because I never got paired first, and I would always think to myself, is it because of being dark? Is it because of the way I looked? Is it because of my name? Or I remember feeling nervous when I would talk about my name. But I never knew, I didn't understand, back then it was my culture, or there was other dynamics at play that maybe taught me these messages so young. And it wasn't until college when I really started to explore that, and I started to get into my degrees and realize oh, wow, this played a huge part in my life. And, there was a period in my time, and I think Elizabeth probably had this too, and many other people, where I almost didn't feel Arab at all. Not by I was going to say not by choice, but really it kind of was, right? Because I felt this pressure to be more white, to fit in with society, to fit in. And that was really around high school when I didn't really know who I was and really just wanted to fit in because that's, especially being in the South, that is what worked. And then, now as an adult, I am completely the opposite. Not completely. I understand that I am very assimilated, into the culture, as much as I don't want that to be sometimes. But now in my life, I try as hard as I can to embrace our culture and to hold on to it as much as I can, because not only are we losing it, but I'm proud of it. So, yeah.
No, absolutely. It's not that easy to try to champion the tendency or the feeling of approval addiction, and it could be. There's so many different types of addiction, probably you guys know, in different degrees, constantly seeking to get the approval of the new society and new culture. You guys are second generation American, being just an immigrant. I came here when I was 19 years old, and talking to other immigrants that just left their home world into this new world, especially when you're coming from very conservative Eastern culture, traditional culture, where you have the traditional gender role expectation, the traditional tribal connections, all about family, that kind of feel like the guilt that like, I'm not doing enough to help my family back home. But you guys are second generation, so you have, your grandparents and your parents being born here maybe made things a little bit easier. But do you guys see, I guess I want to bring Elizabeth in, do you see that approval addiction amongst your nieces and nephews and siblings, towards the westernized culture or the American culture?
Yes, I think that it shows up differently than how it did for my mom and for how it did to my grandmother, who was the immigrant, right? Um, you called it the approval. What did you call it?
We call it approval addiction. It's a very common and popular phenomena in the dental world that it can actually cause you're failing in your profession or failing as a business owner if you're constantly you are passive just to gain somebody's approval. I want everybody to like me. I want everybody to see or to know how interesting I am, and that can actually really diminish the skills of building a relationship, a healthy relationship. Not like a co-independency on other people, but I see it very common and prevalent in the immigrants that come here, especially if they come very young, like at age 17, 18, 19-year-old, because, God knows the Western world has so many temptations, and without that traditional tribal connection and without your support system that you can go to your mom and your mom said, no, don't do that, don't listen to that, don't do that. So being alone here is very different than you have support. So that approval addiction, we talk a lot about it in the episodes. Some of the guests did go through that. Some of the guests that just had more support for some reason that did not experience that at all.
That is very interesting, and I can absolutely understand that, because, and I kind of wonder. See, our family came over with it at a time. So my grandmother came from a community of very conservative. Like for instance, her mother wasn't allowed. So my great grandmother wasn't allowed to go to school unless she wore her thobe, where all the other students were wearing like other outfits, or was it maybe a uniform or something like this? And she was like, I don't want to go to school in my thobe. Nobody else is wearing it. And my great great grandmother said, okay, then you don't go to school. So my great grandmother didn't go to school because she didn't want to not wear a thobe. So, things like this where, growing up, we were always taught, cover up. And then coming to America, my mom was first generation, right? So like she was taught, no shorts, especially around uncles or, men who walk into the house, and then come me, or our generation, me and my sister, and with my dad, who's also second generation American, he was like, oh, it's okay. Like, let them go take dance classes. And my mom was like, I wanted to do that growing up. So yes, let's put them in those experiences. And so while my grandmother definitely experienced, being passive and, kind of like trying to kind of like, pacify, people to get what she needed or to survive. That was how she survived, is by doing that. And then my mom recognized this in my grandmother, tries to do it differently. And so she's still, and I see it in our generation too, but in different ways. We are more less conservative than like my grandmother's generation.
Dalal, sorry,
Yeah,
Elizabeth, go
yeah,
ahead,
no,
finish up.
Yeah, I wanted to jump in because I definitely see it how Elizabeth is saying, and I see our generation still struggling with that, but I also don't see it as much of a struggle as like something we should kind of be holding on to in a way. Not necessarily the people pleasing, because I think sometimes that plays a role, plays a part, plays a function. So what I mean by that is like, we go into this Western world and it's very individualistic. And although that has some benefits, having a more communal culture and family and lifestyle is actually very healthy too, despite what the Western world might teach us. And so I think that, people pleasing, yes, if it comes to making yourself miserable, like, okay, we should check that out and see what's going on, because if you're not well, obviously you can't take care of your village also. And I also see that, your village is also depending on you to help them too. So it's not so much this, I think it's been spun into this like negative thing, like, oh, it's so horrible to, care about what people think, but also your village gives you a community, it keeps you alive, it helps you succeed. So I hope that I'm on the same page with that. If that's what we're talking about. I want
yeah.
to make sure that that made sense. Yes.
I think so. I agree with that, Dalal.
Yeah. Like I think it's both and yes, keep
Mhm.
going.
No, yeah, it's like coming from the culture of like being in community, it is important to care about what other people think.
Yes.
And then the
Yes.
other end of that too is like when you take care of your people, they then take care, or they're supposed to then take care of you, as like it's a partnership. But then like
Right.
coming to America, if somebody is coming from this culture, I imagine that they're taking care of others, not recognizing that they're going to take care of themselves. Like they're not looking out for you as your own community might. Then you go, oh, wait, maybe I'm doing this wrong. Kind of losing that part of the culture. If they're alone, maybe, I don't know, or what, separating. I think it can go so many different ways.
Yeah, I'm just going to add something really quick here that, I definitely see our generation struggling with, for example, like moving to a new city. When they have their family here, they do often feel that guilt of, our aunts and uncles who lived in Palestine, like feeling like you can't go, like you're my only daughter, you're my only son, or whoever it is, like you need to stay here and take care of me. And I get that, especially as a mom now, I'm like, oh, I definitely want my kids to take care of me. And although the Western world inside sees that as maybe something that's selfish, I kind of see it as a scary, as survival, right? Like, of course we want to be taken care of. Kind of like why you're saying, you had the experiences of like calling your aunts when you were like, oh my gosh, I want that community again. So I see that. And then I also see the generation or who feel like, but there's so much to this world that I want to experience, and I don't want to be held back just because, of course, I want to take care of my parents. Of course, I want to be there. And I wish I could do both. So once again, another example of feeling like I'm not enough, or I'm not taking care of my family enough. And I'm also not exploring my own self enough, and I'm not independent enough. So it's always an in between.
You guys actually tapped into a couple of concepts that, whether intentionally or not, that's how good you are as therapists.
Glad to hear it.
that that number one is when we displace ourselves from our home world into the new world, we call it, is we become almost the ambassadors to advocate for our culture, you know.
Mhm.
But at the same time, we have to work harder and overperform in order for us to be seen, recognized, and acknowledged as a civil people, good citizens, contributing to our society. Now, the struggle is, like you said, it's a balance, right? Part of us wants to, that's our belief system. Part of us wants to stick to the belief system because our belief system is our heritage. Our belief system is honoring our ancestors. But when you come to the point, like when you went to college, say that I want to make my own life. I want to create my own experiences. Then you get that nagging, right, voice inside of you. Okay, so the belief system that I have been using or constituting my conduct all these years, I need to modify it. But unfortunately, you tap into the guilt, right? I feel guilty because that's my roots. These are my heritage. How can I, let go of that? How can I abandon that belief system? Where I think we need to teach the new generation it's okay, like you said, Dalal, to be this and that. In my generation, my back in my day, when we came to the United States in the 80s, it's either you're Arab or American. There's no in between. Now things have changed, right? Now the society is ready to accept you as a hybrid. The society is ready to accept you as a multicultural, adaptation of the life that you have created. So, for example, Dalal, your children, and inshallah soon Elizabeth's children, you're gonna see that you're gonna get to the points like, okay, I need to design this a little bit better because I need to be fair to my heritage and my ancestors, but I need to be fair for my children to make sure that they have both worlds. And that's a beautiful thing, being multilinguistic, having the cultural competency. You have the ability to be empathetic and sympathetic with our culture. You can live anywhere. You can adapt a lot easier. You start picking up a lot of tools that is going to help you, tools that's going to help you, navigate through whatever challenge you're going. I hate to say it, we always think like our parents are going to live forever. They don't.
Yeah.
I mean, between my my in-laws and my parents, my mom is the only one is still alive. So you became the matriarch, right, of your family. Then you got a bigger responsibility to pass on that knowledge, to pass on that belief system that you have redesigned or recreated, and hope, basically hope for the best. But that's the most common challenge with all the guests that I interviewed so far, and all of them are immigrants, and it doesn't matter whether they're coming from the Dominican or Puerto Rico or from Lebanon or Palestine. It doesn't really, or Egypt. It doesn't really matter. They all say the same thing: is the struggle and the challenges when you come to the point and you face your identity crisis, right? You're trying to overcompensate in order for the society to accept you. And that goes into education, which I would love to talk to you guys about. We'll start with Elizabeth, and what got you into, what was the drive about for higher education and got into therapy?
So I think that it was my dad had always said that I was a good listener. And so he just thought, oh, you could do this, you could do that as a listener, maybe therapy. And I had already studied a little bit of like psychology because I was curious. I was curious about how to solve problems because I saw in my family we're loud, we're fighting, there's, drama going on. And I saw this side by side with American culture where I never saw it in other people's households the way that I saw it in mine. And so I thought, how do people solve these problems that they're having? Like, why is my family not? And so I thought, I want to learn, I want to know how they do that. So I go to school and I go get my master's degree. And of course, people were like, oh, okay, you're going to get your master's degree. So I got my master's degree and I actually learned the opposite of what I thought, which was that the program that I went to, the marriage and family therapy program I went to, was very non-pathologizing. So what I learned is that actually there is no normal, that there's nothing wrong with my family. My family solves a lot of things. They just solve it in their own way. And that I'm comparing an Arab community to an American community in the way they solve things differently. And it's not fair for me to say my family has problems and they don't know how to solve things and we need to fix them, because that's just not the case. You can't. So this is why I went into it, because I thought originally I want to learn how to solve these problems. And my dad kind of encouraged me to try that out, and I ended up leaving with the best experience and how to help people.
That's so sweet. How about you, Dalal?
Yes, I I had a issue with making my own decisions in college. So I said easiest decision was to follow my sister. But once I did start to do that, I actually was very interested. I started taking the same classes as she was, and it was interesting because at the time Elizabeth she was learning all this new stuff and like really just had differences in viewpoints and was so open-minded and curious, and I was not with that. I was very much so like, oh my gosh, she needs to be, this sort of way. But then once I got to my classes, it made me so curious too. It made me, have all these questions and want to explore and about human development and how we are raised. And so that's the path that I started to go down. Plus, I was dealing with my own stuff at the time that I started my own therapy and realized how much it helped. And it was actually a marriage and family therapist, because my sister encouraged me to go to a marriage and family therapist, and it was incredible. It really just helped my life greatly. So
And you didn't
wanted
follow
to help.
Sorry,
Uh-huh.
Dalal. You didn't
Go
follow
ahead.
everything exactly like me. You went to a different program than me. You did
Yes.
something different.
No, I definitely do. But I also was like, I'm just gonna. You made it easy. You helped me out. I don't see it as a bad thing.
No, definitely not. Can we high five?
Yeah.
Oh,
Oh,
ready?
yeah. Nobody can see that. Oh, well, yes, they can.
Ready? 1, 2, 3.
Yeah.
Sorry. This is
You're
us.
so funny. Yeah.
No, you guys are so sweet. No, you are so sweet. First of all, let me add, as an Arab immigrant, not first generation, second generation, there's no psychology can figure out how Arabs do things. I
I
tried.
love that.
Trust me.
Yes.
There should be a whole world of different psychology to master. It's so complicated. We're very special people, but we're very complicated.
Oh, but it makes it so beautiful, and it's so much more complex and rich.
Yes.
Like there is. I really don't like the idea that Arabs are too much or are, too problematic, because the way they do things, everyone has problems. Everyone, all cultures, all societies. Americans have problems too. They just hide it and they don't show it. And, you don't see it. And so it's just, yes, of course, Arab families have difficulties and problems, but, I think that you have to speak the language, not necessarily the language, but understand the culture and know how to kind of work with that, which a lot of people in America don't know how.
No, I agree with you. It's a case of somebody suppressing the other party in order for them to look good, and just dominating, So in every culture, in every society, there's the good and there's not the so good, because we are human, we are wired, we are chemistry, we are psychology. So, but the way I explain it to some of my friends, from my experience, is coming to a different culture. We're wired in a certain way, just like a wire on your phone, right? And you're trying to plug that wiring system into the new society. You need an adapter, right? And that adapter is basically that soften right, the transaction or soften the modification or the adaptability when you have an adapter. So that little adapter, that's the key to actually join and connect the two culture and the two worlds as an immigrant, because it doesn't matter. Again, you guys are second generation American. I'm an American immigrant, and the yearning inside of you when you hit middle age, it's very strong and it's very, very nostalgic. And if you're not very careful, you can definitely go through a degree of depression, a degree of, I don't have a purpose. Where's my lifeline? So if you are very aggressive as an immigrant coming in and just plugging yourself into the new world and the new culture, whatever that culture is, whether Southeast Asia or the Western world, it doesn't really matter. It's going to be okay when you're young, but when you get older, that residue is going to start surfacing, right? All these nostalgic emotions, values, thoughts, they're going to start surfacing. Then you have to deal with them, right? Because when you're young, you're just so busy, you're trying to make, ends meet because you left everybody that you love and everything that you know behind. That's a big price to pay. And we always say, الغربة صعبة والثمن غالي. Being a stranger in somebody's land, it's very, very difficult. And the price is very, very high. So we're constantly checking ourselves like, was that worth it? Was it worth it? So to have that adapter, I think, if we can just take it slow, but as Arabs, we're so passionate. We're very task oriented. Do this and do more. Failure is not an option. Giving up is not an option because you sacrifice so much. There is sacrificing your family connection is priceless, and you can never, ever, ever get it back the way it used to be. That's gone. You know what I'm saying? And then you realize the value of it when you end up being a spouse, being a parent, and you said, oh my God, what was I thinking? And then you start changing your belief system and your values a little bit. That becomes your adaptability. That's your adapter. You're going to plug your children into the new society because although I was born and raised in Saudi Arabia, our household was very Jordanian, Palestinian, culture. When we stepped out of that house, it was more a Saudi culture. So, since I can remember, I always had the adaptability skills because I still was in a foreign land, although it was Arabic speaking. The Islam was the dominant religion, it was very conservative, but it's not. Palestinian Jordanian culture is not as conservative as that. It was very, very extreme in Saudi Arabia. Now, of course, it's a whole different story, but how about education? How important and the drive for education within your household as you guys growing up? Did you get a lot of the stories that our people need to strive for education? That's all you got, shahatik slahik, that kind of thing. Did you guys ever get that from your grandparents or your parents? Let's start with Dalal.
I definitely remember experiences and stories, hearing it from Sitti, from our grandmother on my mom's side. And I do remember education wasn't something that it almost wasn't a question. We were going to get an education. And I do feel we were definitely privileged enough to be able to get an education for sure. So that, it just never was a question. I definitely heard it more from our Sitti, and I get why. It's interesting though, because I see what Elizabeth was talking about, that like flexibility. And if we wanted to do other things like acting or dancing and things like that, there was a lot more acceptance for it. And, definitely a push to try it. And again, we would hear stories from our parents that would say, I always wish I could do this. I always wanted to do this. So, yes, definitely both. And, like a push to do what you want to do. And you do need an education to succeed. So,
Yes.
What was your experience?
Yeah, I had this experience where it's not a question that you're going to college. My grandmother, she wishes that she went to more school. So I think that she was definitely proud of us for going. And I think that also a lot of people in our family, and I think it was very much encouraged to hurry up, get married. Like that's the end of that's what you should be reaching towards. Like if I was to have gotten married and not gone to college, I think that maybe my parents would have been like, no, you need something. But I think everyone else would have probably said, oh yeah, that's what you do. It's okay.
That's a great point. I'm sorry to interrupt.
Yeah. So I think that, and I also wonder, I think that a lot of my grandmother and a lot of people in our family, is kind of, they're proud that I went to college, but in college you learn so much, you get exposed to so many different things. And it, like how you said, you things aren't the same as it used to be. And so in my experience, it's like once I've gone out there and I come back home, it doesn't, like, I've come in with all these ideas and my family's like, you're wrong. This is not, we had a lot of conversations about everything I'm learning. And uh, come to find out, they were right about many things. But also, I've learned so much from my experiences, and things kind of will never be the same. I've traveled a lot also, and I've come back home, and there's phrases, I can't think of the phrase right now, but maybe you said it, is that it's just not the same when you return.
Yes. I would like to jump in on that too real quick, just to say you are 100% right. It's almost like education wasn't the very first thing. And maybe this is coming from the conservative background that, my grandmother had left, right? She left, things were changing, but she didn't experience the change, right? In Palestine. So when she was here, I think the push is get married, get married, get married, get married. And so, a lot of us did. And then also a lot of us also got education too, but education was it wasn't until after we were educated really that it was like, you should be a doctor. You should be, you should be a dentist. You should be all these things, because they want us to succeed and have an easier life than they did.
You mentioned that, if I can jump on what she said, is that this is an interesting thing that we've talked about before, which is that my grandmother left Palestine, her generation left Palestine and came over here, and leaving that conservative generation wanted to hold on to it so tightly because of what was lost. And that it kind of, she did not experience all the changes that was happening in Palestine, that when new immigrants were coming over, they would say like, what? No, like, we're not conservative like that. And me and my sister and us were like, wait, you didn't come from the same experience as me? And it wasn't the case, because they came over much later, and in Palestine, they had already like progressed to different ideas. And we were kind of like the
old fashioned.
Yes.
Well, because you're not in touch with that world, and you're not being updated about what's going on. And I agree with you 100%. When I went to Egypt, the last time I was in Middle East was 1991, and I landed in 2024. So I was like, what? For me, it was like ancient Egyptian. It was like different. It was progressive. It was advanced. I was very, very impressed. But as a immigrant from that part of the world, I can tell you two things that we try to, again, we sacrifice everything. So we try to hold on to that culture and the heritage, because that's our lifeline. Just in case I decide I had enough, I want to go back. You want to stay in touch with that, right? You want to go back and not to be labeled as, oh, you just, forgot about your heritage. You are a traitor. You abandon your culture. What are you doing here? You should go back to the West. And a lot of people experienced that. They went back. They were not accepted because of their ways, and they end up coming back to the United States. And that's very, very lonely process to be in. That's number one. Number two, education is that your armor. right? Because my dad used to tell me that a government can come and take your house. A political system can flip your life upside down. A husband can take your money or take your spirit, but nobody can take your knowledge in your head. And that was implanted in us since day one, because as an immigrant, my parents left Jordan, went to Saudi Arabia, from Saudi Arabia came to the United States. So you're constantly moving, and you are always worried that that value system and that belief system is going to be eroded from the process of immigration, from the process of acculturation, simulation, adaptation. And your parents is like, don't let that happen. This is your job, just like eating and drinking, don't forget where you came from. And that is giving to us as if you are a little post boy, or doing your paper route. Don't talk to strangers. Those are the lessons that they give us in order to protect ourselves. Getting married is basically continuation of the lifeline, especially with Palestinians. That is huge. Arabs in general, don't you continue with the lifeline. Don't stop there. Make a lot of us, because we want to keep transcending that heritage, and also not only just have children, teach your children what I taught you, and make sure that continues, becomes transgenerational and multi-generational knowledge and culture. It is another way of being an immigrant, ensuring that not all is lost. So I'm telling you right now, the nightmare, or our biggest fear, is to lose that connection. That is priceless. Like I said, that's, you cannot, I don't care how highly educated you are, what kind of position in society you have, and how much money you have, you can't buy that. You can't bring that back. The moment that severed, you just lost it forever. And that's always our fear. No. Educate, knowledge, teach the people about us, look at us. They need to see us. They need to acknowledge us, but also have offsprings to carry that heritage forward. That's the only way we can keep it alive. And I'm just trying to explain to you, it's not because, I don't think they're trying to pressure you. It's just that's their duty.
Oh,
especially
yes,
of course, of course.
absolutely.
Parents. Yeah.
And I think,
go ahead.
when you mentioned earlier about the differences between like the Lebanese community and the Palestinian community, one thing that I noticed here in Alabama is that the Lebanese community is much less holding on as much as our Palestinian community, and that is because of what you mentioned, which is they're afraid of losing important parts of the culture, or the culture, just losing it. Whereas Lebanese, they have their country, they're the Paris of the Middle East, and so it's less of a. Whereas in my Palestinian side is much more of a, like, we have to hold on tight to whatever's left.
It's a crisis.
It's a crisis.
And I think, there's many in our families who do interpret it, unfortunately. I wish they wouldn't, but they do interpret that push to pass it on as like, they're so invasive, they don't understand, they're so rude, blah, 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 blah. And me and my sister, and I feel like just a few other cousins, we really understand that, that's a holding on, that's a cry, that's a grief, right? Like, that is a desire to not lose this beautiful thing that we have. And so I don't see it when they do those things. I take it as they care, and they love us and they want the best for us. And so I see it as a way more beautiful thing than a negative thing. So it's negative because unfortunately we have to do that, but it's not negative because they're doing it. I hope that makes sense.
No, it makes absolute perfect sense, and you put it beautifully. And it brings me to the question to you, Dalal. Now you have the twin boys. How is that, ignited or made you maybe change a certain belief system? Because like I said, when I hit middle age of my 40s, I started modifying a little bit, because I just felt that, yeah, it is my heritage and my culture, but unfortunately some of the values are not serving me anymore. It's like putting away your sweaters, putting away your summer dresses kind of thing. I'm not going to erase it completely and not acknowledge it, but I'm not going to be necessarily use it on daily basis like I used to when I was 19 years old, because now I'm just completely acculturated and simulated within the society. Certain basic values, and I always call it like the earth core. You know, the earth core, the electromagnetic field, the core of earth is still the same, you know, since earth got created, but the geography of earth have changed because the weather have changed, the climate have changed, and earth had to adapt. We have more water, less land. Maybe before we had, you know, during the ice age, things have changed. During the, you know, meteor hit earth, things have changed on the surface, but the core of the earth is still the same, and that's our core. It's always going to be the same. Yeah, we dress it up, you know, very modern, you know, we get tattoos, we get piercings, you know, we put on swimsuit, we go swim in public, which is like a big no-no, you know, and like in our ancestors being a little bit more egalitarian, a little bit more liberal, but the core is still there. So do you see that you are constantly thinking about, I wonder what I'm going to teach those boys? What do you pick out of it, you know, the good, or you drop it, the not so good, as far as might be not serving it, because they are third generation American now, right?
Second and third, yes, because my husband is first generation. So yes, and I'm hoping that kind of is a little bit stronger than mine. But yes, I mean, I'm constantly, and I don't know if it's like the therapy side. I think it's all the sides, the therapy side, the American side, the Arab side, that is just always thinking about what is best to teach these kids. And yes, I definitely have chosen and still choose, and I have to choose every day how to pass on the culture and the parts that I like and love, and the parts that have not been colonized. Let me say that. So, you know, for example, we named my children Arab names, and I remember lots of family members, even Palestinian family members too, who, but who are very, you know, I can't fault them because I know that they are unfortunately a product of the diaspora, a product of assimilation and colonization here. So anyways, would make comments just about like, you don't want to do that. Like they're going to get made fun of. And in my head, I'm like, and I'm going to teach my children to be proud of it. And I'm going to teach my children that there's nothing wrong with their names, you know, all these things. And then there's, you know, parts that I do want to maybe change a little bit. So for example, like how I teach them, instead of, you know, immediately thinking about spanking and corporal punishment or whatever people call it, I'd like to use other steps first, you know, because I know that they understand, even though it might not happen quickly. It's not an immediate response out of fear. I want them to have more of an understanding, which I know also too, you know, there are plenty of stories of grandparents who were, you know, who did talk in that way and explain and describe
parenting,
gentle
the Arab
parenting
style that is
gentle
not
parenting,
the mainstream idea of how Arabs were or could be.
Right. And there are stories of gentle parenting in the Arab world and our family. And there's also more not gentle. And what I have noticed though too is sometimes your children need to know that you're not going to be so gentle, you know, and not in the sense of you're going to hurt them, but that you're serious and that you need them to act right for their safety. So 100%, I think it's a constant whirlwind in my head of what do I pass on and what is not good. And then there's that part of, will other people judge me for this, right? Are other people judging me because I'm trying to teach them Arabic? And are other people judging me because they're not Arab enough, but they have Arab names, you know, like, so it's just this constant battle. I'm going to stop.
How about you, Elizabeth? Now you're an auntie, right? Do you have, is it the only two nephews you have, or your other nieces and nephews?
No, these are my babies. I'm their
Khalti.
Yeah, they call me Khalti. This is the best role ever. What about it? We have talked many times about how, you know, how she can continue the culture through them, or how we all can. And one way is they call me Khalti. They call my brother Khalo. They call, you know, her husband's siblings, you know, Ammo and Amto, and you know, they will call my mother Sitti, and their other grandmother Teta, and Sido and Jiddi. And so, you know, that's one way. It's a we've talked about it with cousins and other people, is that you have to be purposeful. You can't just say, oh, they'll learn one day. You have to make it a purposeful, everyday thing, or else you will lose it. We were so upset growing up that my parents did not make us learn Arabic. And when we were little, we knew more. But growing up, became less important. And so that's something that really bothers. It's a constant. I'm constantly studying Arabic, trying to learn. But for them, we want them to learn, and so they've made the decision. We, as in a family, but the
You are
parents,
the part of it.
yeah, true, right, communal culture, right. But the parents have decided they're going. Her husband's family is going to speak with them only in Arabic, and they have to answer only in Arabic.
Mm-hmm.
So that way they'll learn, and they watch Arabic kids shows on YouTube, and anytime there's an Arab who speaks to them, we're like, speak to them in Arabic. They'll learn English eventually.
Mm-hmm. But I do want to say, the other part of I'm sorry to interrupt you too.
No.
Some parts that were like, I guess, changing is just more of that conservative, and especially as a therapist, like, I am okay with my children learning all sorts of things. That doesn't scare me. I think it's going to educate them and help them and be a better person and human, and which religion that they want to potentially choose, which I know our families hate, but that's just the way that I believe in it. And so, some of those things are changing, and I'm not as educated in this area, but it does make me curious about, after colonization, well, which pieces of their conservatism is the colonized piece and which was truly the culture. And it's kind of hard to sift through and figure out, but those are the pieces that I know I am maybe different than majority of some of the people here, or the culture or the family and stuff like that. So
No, I agree. I mean, religion is very private and personal. It's really spiritual practices.
Mm-hmm.
I grew up I lived in a very, very structured religion. Not only Islam, it was but Wahhabism in Saudi Arabia. It's very, very extreme. It's a different sect than they are Sunni, but even like there's another branch of Sunni in it. So
Gotcha.
so I totally agree with you. Language is beautiful, customs, code of conduct, respecting the seniors, food, music, there's no reason for them to have one or the other. They can have the and, in it. And the more and they have, the more well refined and very well rounded individuals that you're gonna actually produce, because like I said, you can drop them probably in any culture. They're gonna adapt because like, oh yeah, I'm multilingual, I'm multicultural. I get it, I can see it, I can relate to it, I can identify with it. And then that builds confidence. That builds, my mom spoke 4 languages, my sister speaks 4 languages. I played the violin and piano, my sister played the piano and the cello. And my mom at home, she spoke Arabic, English, and French. I mean, fluent. So we had like a lot of Italian terminology. And then when we vacationed in Austria, we picked up a little bit of German. That's beautiful. That gives you confidence. You're comfortable. You're not constantly scared. It's like, oh, they're so different than me. What am I going to do? You get stuck, and then you go down the rabbit hole. But it is definitely a beautiful thing. Now, unfortunately, we are reaching to the end of our hour, and I have the last question for you guys. We're going to start with Elizabeth to give us an advice. If you would be talking to a young lady coming from Lebanon or Palestine or just the Middle East and thinking about coming to the United States to seek a higher education and just a better life, what would be the advice that you would give her as a woman, Arab?
That's a very hard question. As an American, my immediate thought, as a Palestinian or Arab American, my immediate thought is don't do it. Stay there. I want to be where you are right now. Because I wish I could have that experience. But if you're coming, I would say you have everything it takes to be successful. If you compare yourself to other people, you're doing yourself, we can't help but compare ourselves, but you are just as capable, or maybe even more capable, to succeed like everybody else. That's what I
That's
would say.
beautiful. All right. How about you, Dalal?
I think I would say a summary of kind of everything we've talked about, which is you can do both. Like, and exactly, you have the tools to be successful. You can do both. You can learn this new culture, but don't forget the past. You need that soft adapter, right? You need that connection. And no matter what you learn here, it still is beautiful. And I think that there's a lot of, obviously, politics and stuff. You can't be Palestinian without talking about that. But whatever you hear here, you have to hold on to what you know.
No, I agree with both. And I was laughing when Elizabeth said, at this point in my life, I would say don't do it. Um, not because it's not worth it. It's just because now again, hopefully one day that you guys end up in Palestine or Lebanon, or
Inshallah.
even go to Egypt, inshallah, and you will see it's an amazing world, and they are so smart and they're so in touch with reality. Even the young generation, it's fascinating, it's beautiful, it's inspiring, and it's really heartwarming. So I don't think the young generation really needs to displace himself, whether by default or by design, as my generation or the generations before me, because the whole world, everybody's saying the whole world there's a new earth that's being birthed right now. And I think,
Sure.
Dalal, your children, inshallah, Elizabeth's children, it's
Inshallah.
going to be a better world. I can feel it. I pray for it every single night. So, but thank you guys for coming on. This has been a pleasure. And like I said, I can talk to you forever. And I hope you guys agree to come on another time. We want to dig deeper into the mental health, where the place of mental health in the Arab culture and the narrative of us growing up. So thank you guys for listening and watching on this platform, the Mindset Mastery Moments. And don't forget that these episodes are uploaded every single Wednesday on the Spotify and the Apple podcasts, and also they're available to you as a video to watch on YouTube on the Greenwood Dental Partners YouTube channel. So please, if you like this content, like, share, and subscribe. That way you won't miss any episodes. And if you have any questions or any topics that you would like us to address on this podcast, please leave your comment down below. And I would leave Dalal and Elizabeth Shahid information as a therapist. If you know anybody that would like, especially in Alabama, that would like to reach out and be using their services. And I hope to see you next time. This is Slava the Jordanian.